I think you can do better than that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay. I think the moderator has already introduced me as Tsitsi Marowa. I'm Head of Legal Services at POTRAZ, and I am going to be giving you a bit of background. The assignment today was just to give an update on what POTRAZ has done so far as the designated Data Protection Authority in terms of the Cyber and Data Protection Act. But I just wanted us to have a bit of context in terms of what we are going to be doing as POTRAZ in our capacity as the designated Data Protection Authority. I'm sure most of you will recall that in July 2020, we had public hearings across the country, wherein this act now was still in its draft form. It was still a bill, and there were a lot of discussions around whether POTRAZ should actually be the Data Protection Authority or an independent institution should be created by government to run with this assignment. But Parliament, in its wisdom, in December 2021, saw it fit that in view of a number of issues, it was better to give the assignment to an institution that is already functional and will be able to at least start or kickstart the process while an independent institution may then be created. I just wanted to raise this particularly in the context that within our region, that is Southern Africa, we have about 8 countries that have already enacted data protection legislative frameworks, and from December 2021, we became the 9th SADC country to have a legislative framework on cyber and data protection. So out of the 16, we are now the 9th one. And in terms of our standing at the global level, in terms of the cyber global index, we are actually 74 globally. That we have at least some legislative framework, we have at least some institutional framework that has been put in place to protect the rights of citizens in Zimbabwe insofar as their data is concerned. And I think at Africa level, we stand at number 24 as a country in terms of having something in place to ensure that there is a protection of data of the citizens of Zimbabwe. I think you also agree with me that in line with NDS 1, we are working towards a digital economy as a country, towards a digital economy by 2030. And cyber and data protection is actually an integral part of a digital economy, because for people to keep on uptaking or taking on use of ICTs, they need to have confidence and trust in the use of those ICTs. So this act is very critical, like Lisa was saying, because it is an integral part of what we are working towards as a nation insofar as NDS 1 is concerned and becoming a digital economy is concerned. And we have seen that we are not working on this as just in isolation as a country, but other continents have already started as far back as 2005 to put in place cyber and data protection frameworks. You look at the EU, they have done a lot around this area, and I think they've amended their pieces of legislation more than 5, if not 10 times, working on it. So if we see that our Cyber and Data Protection Act needs amendment, needs improvement, we can still go back to the drawing board, and then we can really work on areas that need attention from the process that we are doing. This is a collaborative approach, a multi-stakeholder approach. I'm sure MISA agrees that POTRAZ has been coming on the table, having discussions with MISA and other stakeholders to ensure that we work towards implementation of this act. We work towards a culture of compliance regarding cyber and data protection issues, as well as working towards improving what we already have at the moment. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a background, because if I just tell you what we have done so far to implement, I'll do that in 3 minutes and I'll sit down. Because this is a new baby for POTRAZ. We got the assignment in December 2021, and it's 6 months down the line. And I'm sure last Sunday, most of you who read the Sunday Mail have actually seen traction that we are in the process of talent identification as an authority. And we have opened this to the whole nation. Any Zimbabwean who is interested in taking up any of those 23 positions that were advertised last Sunday can actually come forward and submit. Oh, the deadline is actually tomorrow. So if you are interested in being the director of the Data Protection Authority, you are interested in being head of research, you are interested in being head of advocacy, interested in being a research officer, a certified engineer who will be able to do forensics, etc., dealing with issues of data breaches. The adverts are in the Sunday Mail, and I think they are also on Jobs Zimbabwe. So all Zimbabweans are free to apply as POTRAZ is setting up this institution. So already you can see that the ball has already started rolling within POTRAZ as a designated Cyber and Data Protection Act in terms of talent identification. From this process, because this is something new, not just in Zimbabwe, but in our continent, because a lot of data protection authorities in our continent are still struggling with issues of capacity building, issues of expertise in this area. So we will move on to capacity building of those who would have been identified through this talent identification process. So please submit your applications. The deadline is actually 4:30 tomorrow at POTRAZ. You address it to the Director General of POTRAZ. So I would have actually sat down if I was just going to be talking about updates on what we have done so far as the authority, but there is a lot of work actually lined up. We are in consultation also with MISA in terms of the information sessions that we are going to be running throughout the country. We want the public to appreciate what the data protection provisions are, but at the same time, we also want the citizens to appreciate that over and above our role as the Postal and Telecommunications Regulator, we are the designated Cyber and Data Protection Authority, and we will be looking at how can I address this, the feedback? Is it where I'm standing? Is it? You can switch it so that I use this one. Remove it, we need to aside. Thank you. For some of you who have already participated in the national engagements on at the beginning, that was the public hearings, and those of you who have already engaged or interacted with the Act, I'm sure the object is very clear to everyone, and it's stated in the Act that the objective is to build confidence and trust in the use of ICTs. A lot of our people, and I think COVID has taught us all, that there is certainly a need to ensure that there is protection for citizens in terms of use of ICTs, looking at different numbers or various cyber security threats that citizens can actually be exposed to when using the cyberspace. And globally, about 133 of the 192 countries actually have data protection and privacy regulation in place. And ITU actually estimates that 1 trillion in 2020 to 6 trillion in 2021 was actually lost to cybercrime. And therefore, the need to ensure that there is a framework to defend or protect the citizens from all possible threats related to the cyberspace is something that is very critical. And like I indicated earlier on, this is a priority area under the National Development Strategy #1. We cannot have a digital economy without cyber and data protection as a nation. And I'm sure you have also looked at our quarterly reports. There's been a massive growth in the use and uptake of ICTs, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic. And you have also seen since 2012, I think MISA has been part of this as well, there's been a concerted effort at SADC level to harmonize data protection laws to safeguard the citizens of the sub-region from abuse of their personal information. And SADC started a project in 2012, which they call the SADC HIPSA project, which was meant to harmonize all data protection frameworks or laws within our SADC region. And last week, SADC actually engaged a consultant to relook at the model law and see if there are areas where there can be amendments or improvements in view of the fact that this project had started in 2012 and the model law needed a bit of amendments and relook. So this project is actually going to be completed in September, and SADC countries will be able to update different sections of their pieces of cyber and data protection laws. And we are not just doing this as Zimbabwe, but at the African Union level, there is actually a convention which is called the Marowa Convention of 2014, where the African Union actually saw the need as well to protect citizens from different threats related to use of the cyberspace. And this Marowa Convention, unfortunately, so far is only ratified by 5 African countries. And as now the Cyber and Data Protection Authority in Zimbabwe, we are also engaging our ministry to ensure that we are signatory to the Marowa Convention. And there has been good international practice in terms of protecting personal information of citizens. And so the Cyber and Data Protection Act is aligned with the developments at international level and the good practices around this area. So I just wanted to participants to appreciate our duties as the Cyber and Data Protection Authority. This is a big issue for us because we need to promote public awareness. That's one of the duties of the Data Protection Authority, the DPA. And one of the things that we are going to be embarking on this coming month in August is the public information sessions throughout the country. We're going to be running this in all the 10 provinces, and we'll be partnering with different organizations to ensure that citizens appreciate their rights and also understand what their expectations are as far as the provisions of the Cyber and Data Protection Act are concerned. So we are also going to have that regulatory and enforcement role. I'm sure in February you saw the regulatory circular that we issued, wherein we were calling upon private sector that is in the business of processing personal information to come on board and designate what we are calling the data protection officers in the Act. And we have received an overwhelming response from the public sector, from the private sector, and from civil society organizations that process personal information. And as a result, this is part of the regulatory process wherein we want to appreciate who is processing personal information. If you are processing personal information, have you put in place the relevant or the necessary measures to ensure that that information does not leak? There are no data breaches within your organization, because the whole thrust of this is that we do not want citizens to end up seeing their information which they didn't consent to be in the possession of a third party, being in possession of a third party. So this is going to be part of our work, as well as the enforcing compliance with the provisions of the Cyber and Data Protection Act. Where there are data breaches, we already have on our website a toll-free line where we are saying if you feel your data has been breached, you can actually call the authority so that the data breach is reported, and then we look at the institution that processed your data and see if they've put in place the necessary measures to ensure that this does not happen in future. So at the start, or as we commence, we are really encouraging a culture of compliance, and we are going to be working hand in hand with these data protection officers so that they appreciate what they are supposed to do, and we avoid an approach of penalizing people in the first, second part of the year, or as the Act has come into force. But we are going to be encouraging a culture of compliance. There is going to be a lot of training. We are going to be partnering with regional institutions that can certify data protection officers in Zimbabwe in terms of their roles and responsibilities. And this is also something that is starting to happen within the authority in our capacity as the designated Cyber and Data Protection Authority. We have institutions like AFRAUD, and we will be engaging also institutions that have been training DPOs in the EU, so that we also have in-country training programs around this area. So this is also something that is on the table. Part of our work as the DPA is going to be the advisory role to the minister regarding different issues around cyber and data protection. And we will not be able to do this on our own. we still invite that collaborative approach that we started with when this act was being debated, was being drafted, and eventually promulgated. So we will be partnering with a lot of institutions in that regard. We will also investigate complaints. When we receive a complaint that there's been a data breach, we are going to be responsible for conducting inquiries and investigations around this area once a complaint is received from a citizen or a data subject. We will be monitoring developments in the area of data protection and cybersecurity on behalf of the nation and conduct research around this area. And we'll be partnering with academic institutions as well and civil society organizations around this area so that we have evidence-based research as a nation around cyber and data protection. We have already started, like we have been in discussions with Zambia, who were ahead of us in promulgating a cyber and data protection act. We were discussing with them in terms of how the steps that they've taken to implement their act, which was promulgated in 2020. We have also been in touch with ICASA, which is an equivalent of POTRAZ in South Africa, to see what steps these institutions or what steps this country have actually taken at the initial stages of implementation, because this is a new baby for POTRAZ. So there is a lot of engagement at international and regional level as we cooperate with other data protection authorities within the region. And we are going to, in terms of the Act, I mean, our roles and responsibilities are clearly set out in the Act, and we will be working within the confines of the Cyber and Data Protection Act in terms of what we do as an authority. So our powers will be basically on advising the minister and advising the sector as well. We will be authorizing standards and codes of conduct. So we are going to be encouraging different sectors actually to come up with codes of conduct on how they agree as an industry, if it's the banking sector, if it's the NGO sector, if it's the academic sector, what codes of conduct can you come on board with, which we can approve as an authority to say when it comes to collection of data within educational institutions, we are going to be following these guidelines. And we would appreciate that, because this is a lot of work for us over and above our work as the telecoms regulator. So a lot of collaboration is going to be taking place, and a lot of memorandum of understandings are going to be signed with academic institutions, civil society, so that we move with implementation of this act. Of course, we're going to be conducting those inquiries, like I indicated, and we're going to be correcting any data breaches that are reported to the authority. So as far as what we have done so far, I indicated to you that in February, the regulatory circular was actually published in different newspapers to designate DPOs. So any institution that is processing data of more than 30 people has been required, and that information that we received from our citizens is actually helping us to see that, do we need to say 30 people, or do we need to raise the number to 50 or to 250? So it is going to actually assist us as we work on the guidelines regarding the work of the data protection officers. We are also empowered by the Act to come up with guidelines, to come up with standards insofar as implementation of this Act is concerned. So through what we received from different stakeholders, the designation of their DPOs, what they collect the data for, which industry they collect the data for, which citizens submitted, we are sort of in the process of seeing the type of data that is collected in our country, the type of the institutions that are in the process of processing data, and the reasons why they are processing that particular data. So this information is actually something that we are sifting, because we have given, I think, the deadline of end of March, to citizens to submit this, and a lot of institutions actually asked for an extension because they needed authority from their boards to appoint these DPOs, and most institutions were having board meetings around April, around May. So we are still receiving the different names of the data protection officers from around the country. So this information is actually helping us to shape the way in which we should actually operationalize the Act regarding whether we should say institutions that process data for 30 people or 50 people or 100 people. So we'll be issuing further guidance notes on various issues around this Act. We are also in the process of working on regulations. There are certain sections within the Act which needs regulations to spell out certain issues, and this is something that we are working on in conjunction with our ministry as well as the Attorney General's office, so that the regulations are expedited. We are going, like I indicated, next month as well as August and September, there is going to be a countrywide a public awareness program on the provisions of this Cyber and Data Protection Act. And talent identification, I've actually indicated that to you already, and the information sessions that are coming. We are going to be issuing several guidance notes on the rights of citizens or data subjects, on the role and responsibilities of data protection officers in due course. So I think this is what I had to share with you from POTRAZ in terms of what is it that we have done and what is going to be our role. And also to emphasize the point that we are adopting a collaborative approach, because this is a very huge area where we will not be able to do it alone with the 23 officers that are going to be appointed as part of the data protection unity within the authority. So I thank you very much for your attention.